Okay, this is episode 22 of OverSight. We're deep into stage 2 of the Overwatch League, almost ready for stage 3. Luckily, they got rid of QXC before it reached stage 3.
XQC.
XQC,
QXC
whatever. He was a StarCraft 2 player, yeah. If anything, I actually raised the IQ level and, the impact on the game there, because QXC was actually a badass. He was a pretty cool guy. He was in all sorts of things. He was in jiu-jitsu. He actually knew a lot about game theory. I believe he went on to be a game designer, actually. Who knows? Maybe XQC, that could be a future for him, Monte. He could be a game designer. He could just make a game which is sort of like, it would be the equivalent of like Egyptian hieroglyphics, because no one except him would truly be allowed to read the game and know what was going on. And anyone who dared to make any sort of a jab or guess would be called out, possibly using the euphemism treadmill that I referred to in the last episode. A lot of callbacks here, a lot of allusions, but that's the way we roll on this show. So, even though we do have a very interesting rotating set of guests on this show, Monty, a lot of different players, I never know which way we're going to go on this one, who's going to be here. Admittedly, a lot of it's to do with timing and whose schedule's actually available, but I just want to assure everyone at the start of the show, like when I first talk to someone, I try to sort of get a read on them, the temperature, what sort of person they are. I can tell, right? Hydration is one of those guys where he just has a resting face that looks like he doesn't want to be here. But I assure you, he was not in any way forced to be here. This wasn't like Monte isn't like college alumni with his coach or something and forced him to be. He's here of his own volition. And as things get going, maybe when we make fun of the San Francisco shock or something, I don't know, then he'll perk up a bit, things will get going in the episode. So welcome to the episode, Hydration.
Yeah, what's up?
All right, mate. Right. So let's just start here, actually. Since you're a guest that obviously we've almost finished stage 2, and we haven't actually had anyone from your team on whatsoever. Let's actually do a little bit of intro to your team. So I want to know this, okay? When your team was being put together and the roster was like leaked or whatever on Reddit, and most of those leaks were pretty accurate, I noticed when they came out. A lot of people at the time said, "Oh, this team is like being basically made by Bishu or something. Like he's the one who was behind picking the players or something, or he had some key role in it, or he's the guy in with management." What was the kind of the story behind how this lineup came together and the one that you were a part
of? So originally, I was trying out for Shock in July, August, way back then. And I actually was trying out alongside Remix and Bishu for most of it. And later on, we even did some trials together in Boston. So we
dodged a few bullets along the way. Okay. I think it ended up well for you, mate.
Yeah. But we kept playing together quite a bit, and we really enjoyed playing with each other. And so when Bishu was selected, he recommended me.
Okay. Does that mean you actually didn't get in from those tryouts?
Kinda. It's a bit complicated. It was an interesting situation back then.
I mean, obviously, the problem was for the Boston Uprising, you weren't an edgy enough pick, so they had to go with someone else for that one. They had to, you can't build your whole rep as a genius at picking unknown people if you actually pick people who've played in the league before. So then went over to the San Francisco Shock, and they were like, "I'm sorry, you're actually of legal age, and so we'd be able to field you. So you can't come on the team."
Well, their plan of building a roster of entirely hit scan players, he didn't really mesh with that, being a projectile DPS specialist. So he had to change it up, right? It didn't really fit the bill with San Francisco.
Well, no, the irony is, Monty, he ended up on a team in the LA Gladiators, which until recently, when they got Fisher in, obviously, was actually famously known for having people that were pretty set in their roles, you kind of knew exactly what you were going to get from everyone on the team. Whereas obviously, he could have been over on the Dallas Fuel, where basically everyone just gets a turn to do every role in the game at sort of a mediocre level before then moving on to another role and then just get your money's worth, You just got to wring every last little drop out of that Dallas Fuel team. Tell you what, that one took a dark turn, didn't it, mate? That looked like it was turning for a while. That looked like it was starting to get nice. It was starting to become a feel-good story,
I have learned that there aren't feel-good stories that come out of your mouth, Thorin.
No, there aren't. I'm not interested in them. Because life isn't about feel-good stories. You have to lie to make a feel-good story. That's the problem. There's no one at Hallmark who's like a cool guy who lived his life just going like, oh, let's give you thoughts about a life. Hallmark is the equivalent of people who are just like, yeah, you don't look fat in that dress. Like, just a bunch of liars.
That's an interesting take on Hallmark.
Not bad, is it?
That one.
No, you never heard that one, have you?
I have not.
That would also, by the way, be a straight fire Hallmark gift card. You don't look fat in that dress. No one's thought of that one, have they? They've cornered every other market except that. Right, so, well, obviously, you don't look fat in that dress is what we'll talk about when we get to some of the teams later. Your team's actually doing pretty well, Hydration. The timing's great for you to come on the show. So here's the question. I've actually noticed in Overwatch, as I've been learning the game, and it's a very different game from any game I've ever followed, because like I've mentioned on some past shows actually, when you first watch it, you think your brain goes, okay, it's an FPS, let's try and apply some of the things we know from FPS. And actually, even though I come from Counter-Strike, I've actually followed a lot of different FPS games over the years. Obviously, there's many different modes in Quake, Capture the Flag, Team Deathmatch, and these modes all have different sub-roles within them and different ways to play maps, etc. But as I've mentioned on some of the past shows, the more and more I've watched Overwatch, the more it seems more in the vein of a MOBA, actually, in the sense of like how you balance out the roles, and then especially how comps work together and how that basically builds the strategy of what you do in the game. And so one of the things I found really fascinating as the Overwatch League has begun is, I admit, when I first watched Overwatch, I was like a massive pleb who just thought like, oh, all these DPS gate players are just winning the game every time, because you just watch them and they're doing all the flashy stuff. But then I started to watch Apex, and then I obviously saw people like Miro, Ryu Jae-hong doing amazing stuff that wasn't in any way to do with just being a mad DPS. I was like, okay, it's more depth to this. This is interesting. Maybe because obviously in something like League of Legends, you know, if you're a tank, yeah, you can do an amazing job, but you don't really carry the game in the sense, you know. So I was like, right, where's this going to settle? And the interesting thing, obviously, in the last few months, I saw that actually Yiska did a video about this, is that like the combo between people who are the tank player and then sometimes a particular DPS player. So he picked out, I think it was Prophet and who would
Gesture?
Prophet and Gesture, yes, obviously of the Spitfire, and pointed out how this had kind of like defined the meta. So the key thing I've noticed is the tank role in Overwatch seems to have a massive impact. And what I'm leading into here is obviously all that's changed in your team really is to bring in Fisher. And this is a guy where certainly a very good player, but it seems to have turned the whole team around. It seems to have changed everything. So what's the impact of having Fisher on the team been?
He's a lot like a leader, you know. Brings a lot of confidence to us.
Okay.
Pretty crazy.
What do you think, Monte? What changed from just bringing in a tank player? Like, how does that affect the other roles in the team? And suddenly, I mean, this is a team that towards the end of stage one was looking a bit whack.
Well, I think what struck me about the Gladiators in stage one is that they didn't have a lot. They were still working on developing a style that would suit them. And so let's go back to when the Gladiators started. So interestingly, you guys were actually one of the longest practicing teams, as in before Overwatch League began, even back into the World Cup in October and November. You guys were one of the teams alongside the Shock and the Valiant that were practicing the most at that time, right?
Right.
So a lot of these teams that were being set up, I think that when we got to stage one, this was a team that was trying to practice, get up to speed, but also players that were not stars in prior to Overwatch League, like yourself, back when you were on the CLG roster. You've grown a lot individually as a player. And so I think over time, it's just taken time and a lot of practice to get where they are. But when it comes to Fissure directly, beyond the intangibles that Hydration is talking about, where he's a leader within the team, he does open up. We talked with a lot of players saying that tank is main tank. Taimu said this is the most dominating facet of Overwatch these days because it opens up so much space for the DPS players to move and to make plays in. And I think that when we were talking about what was Stuchu released that article where he was comparing it to an offensive lineman in the NFL that creates space for quarterbacks and running backs to be successful. And I think it's a good analogy for the way that Overwatch works, because if somebody is controlling zones and the DPS aren't pressured, they're going to be able to hit more shots. and they're going to be able to focus on 1 or 2 targets at a time instead of the entire team. You're not going to get dove as much. You're not going to have any enemy DPS in your face. It'll be more comfortable for the DPS to play the game, and that's what Fisher does incredibly well. There's a reason why we consider him he's arguably the best tank in the world. You could make a case for, I think him or Gesture are the top 2 tanks in the league. I don't know if anybody else really has a say in that, but especially after we see Fisher unbenched on the Spitfire and over on the Gladiators, you can see what a dramatic effect that makes. So for you, Hydration, what were the factors? Like, have you felt like you've had more room to play with Fissure? What is he doing for you as a DPS player?
Yeah, it just feels like I have more freedom. I just have so much more space to just make plays and really pop off.
Is that partially because of his communication as well? So you know better when he's going in or what he's going to do?
A little bit. It's still a bit shaky for as of right now.
Because of the language barrier?
Yeah.
But even so, his individual play. So what is it about the way that he plays differently that gives you this space? Is it just a sense of timing of when to go in? Is it a sense of positioning or knowing which players are vulnerable on the other team to dislodge?
There's a lot of timing, and there's also a lot of aggressiveness. He's a very, very aggressive. And that's like really beneficial if you're like playing Genji or like Tracer and you want to like go on their backline.
Do you think this has helped out with Bishu as well? Do you think his synergy with Bishu? Because Bishu his style of tanking has changed. He's become more aggressive than he used to be also.
Yeah, it definitely has helped him as well.
Okay, so in terms of actual results, though, the turnaround has been ridiculous for the Gladiators, because I looked it up, actually, and in Stage 1, you only played 2 of the Korean teams. I don't think you played Spitfire. You didn't win a single game against the Korean teams. This split, you've already beaten the Spitfire. You won a game against, I think it was Seoul, right? So it must be drastically different within the team. I mean, the expectations must be different, right?
Yeah, we have a lot higher expectations this stage. And we're definitely reaching them, for sure.
Did you think that adding Fissure to your roster would be this much of a change? Do you think... Okay, so my question... So early on in the stage, we saw you guys playing like a lot of dive, in basically exclusively dive in week 1. And then by week 3, you guys were playing a ton of different compositions and strategies. What was the logic behind that you're trying to sort of work out your internal communication on one comp before you start to diversify your strategies? Or was that just happenstance?
Yeah, we originally were only playing dive with Fissure because it's something that's like really important to be able to do like in the long run. So that's like the first thing we focused on, and we started branching out from there. So that's like why you see all these crazy comps that we've been doing. Because like dive is like, it's like the bread and butter. Like all the communication that's in dive is like the hardest of any other comps. So if you got that figured out, you can do basically anything else.
Okay, that explains a lot about why you guys were doing what you were doing. Because now, the longer this stage goes on, you guys have become increasingly unpredictable. And so what I was alluding to earlier was that you guys in Stage 1 were not... it didn't feel like you had character as a team outside of some of the Doomfist play that you brought to the team. It wasn't like there was a particular flair or uniqueness to the Gladiators. It was just sort of like watching a sort of bland, middle-of-the-road team. But now you guys are bringing in all of these swaps, all of these compositions. Of course, the Doomfist is still there and doing really well for you. But even, we're getting more of Shaz on DPS now, and you playing Lucio and all of this other stuff that's going on. So it seems like, is this something your coaches are bringing, or is this a lot of stuff that Fissure is bringing to the team? How much of the strategies has Fissure affected?
Not much that I can remember. It's mostly like a mix of coaches and players.
So they're the ones who are figuring out how to use all of the tools that you guys have effectively.
Right. We like bounce ideas back off each other, and then we test them, and then we come down to like what we really like.
Right, obviously London Spitfire were the champions of stage 1. How did you beat London Spitfire? What was the key to this game? What were the turning points or the essential strategy that worked for you, do you think?
Strategy, like, it was pretty good. Like, we played like the Sombra on Volskaya. We had that one early fight that we did, and what maps we play against them? I actually don't remember.
I'll check it a second. Right.
Oh, Lijiang.
King's Row and Route 66, and they won Route 66 at the end, but the series is obviously already over that point.
So Lijiang, like, that's probably like one of our best maps. Right now we're like 8-1 on control. The only loss we've had was to Mayhem. So like our control is pretty strong. We pretty much know what to do in control. And then for King's Row, like, we had the Junkrat, or was it the Junkrat?
No, it was when you played against London. Sorry, let me pull that up.
On attack, it was like Pharaoh with something else. I don't remember what the other DPS was. Oh, it was Hanzo, I think.
You guys were playing on attack. You were playing, yes, Hanzo. You were playing Farah. Surefour was playing Hanzo at first, and then switching off into Junkrat and Farah together.
Yeah, so like those pretty standard dive comp, or not dive comp, spam comp, and it was pretty effective against like what we expected London to run.
If you can beat London in the regular season, surely you can just win the stage.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Well, maybe. Why maybe?
There are some caveats to this. They were playing the GC Busan roster for the first 2 maps before switching.
Yeah, Apex champions. Yeah, you're right, Monte. Yeah, you're bigging them up. Yeah, cool. Yeah, basically you could win Apex.
Okay, that roster hasn't looked super great, to be fair, in Overwatch League so far. But to the Gladiators' credit, they did switch over to have Birdring and Prophet in with, Bedosian, Nuss, everybody else, what we would consider London's sort of A team, and they still won on King's Row. So they went 1-1 against the A team. So that is certainly that's a strong showing. I am surprised you knew what they were going to run, though, considering it's very difficult to know which players or which lineup London is running into anybody right now.
You have to realize, Monte, this actual series, if we're being serious, was actually basically the humbling of the London Spitfire. This was hubris from them. Because what they did, Monte, is in the off season of between the stages, they were like, you know what? We've got this amazing tank player sat around. There's a lot of teams in the league need players, right? Sell him, but there's one caveat: don't sell him to any of the good teams. Like, we don't want them to fuck us up. Like, just sell him to one of the teams that aren't doing that well. What LA? Oh, they've got loads of money, idiots, right? Yeah, so sell them to them, and then they were like, you know what? Like, we're playing that team that we sold him to, right? Again, just fuck around, play the B team. You know what? Maybe we'll sell them some more of these players, make them look good. Like put them in the shop window, and then all of a sudden they lose the game, and now everyone's on notice. Now you actually have to play a real team.
I think it's great that they won this match, and I think it's great that they won it in the way they did, like you said, with London, I think, coming in with a bit of hubris and then panic switching into their A roster, who we don't even know is practicing for this opponent. I think that's the craziest thing about London, too, is the way that their coaching staff has said, oh, no, we've been like, preparing one roster for one opponent each week and the other roster for the other opponent. And that means that when they panic switch at halftime and force their A team to do a reverse sweep, you don't even know if these players have been preparing to play against their opponent. Like, for all I know, we didn't see many of these players actually prep for Gladiators or the maps they were playing on or anything like that. So I think Gladiators are doing great. They're certainly in an excellent position to nab a stage playoff spot at this point. But I don't read into it that this situation is going to exist again. But they will, at the very least, force London to take them super seriously next time, obviously.
Okay. Right. Hydration, why do you play Doomfist so much? What is the appeal of this one hero for you?
It's pretty fun. Just kind of just punch in there, you know. Maybe you die. If you don't die, you kill like 3 people. It's pretty fun.
Wait a minute. Part of the fun is maybe you die. Like,
he's a gambler.
he likes the gambling element. Yes. Okay.
It's all or nothing for hydration.
Yeah. Man alive, okay. I'm amazed that that's the first part, though. Like, you know what? You get in there, maybe you die. Hey, who knows? Fuck around. Maybe you're still alive. Kill them all. I don't know. You tell me, mate. I'm just here for the money and the chips. You know, like, what? Fair enough. Okay. Who do you think is the best Western DPS player?
Best Western?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a hard question. From people that are currently playing, I'd have to say...
Oh, here we go. Now he's just teasing us already, man. He's EQO. Okay.
But...
Yeah?
Maybe Sinatra. I haven't seen him play in a while.
He's hyping him up. He's already hyping it. Not even in the league yet. Okay. You think he's better than all the other ones? He's better than Soon, and who else are we going? I mean, can't really say any of the fuel players anymore. Let's be realistic. Who else? Well, let me think. Who else is a good Western one that you'd pick, Monte?
Dreamcasper's been performing very well recently over on Boston.
Problem is the Outlaws have been dying off a bit. So sure, Linkser, yeah. Sinatra's better than all these players, Hydration.
Maybe. We have to see.
What do you mean, maybe? That means you secretly think he is, but you just don't want to fully commit to it, right? Because here's the thing.
Good back in the day.
Right, okay, so it's mainly off of the...
When was the last time you actually played against him? Have you been scrimming against him? Because I'm sure that we've been, the Shock have been saying that they've been scrimming more with the players that are going to be coming of age very soon.
Yeah, last week I did. I think it was last week.
Okay. Right, Monty, you give me your take then. How does Hydration manage to use Doomfist so often and not just lose the game instantly, basically?
Well, I think it's a niche pick. It was funny. I was watching Cuddles, your former coach on CLG, who was then of the Valiant, who has been removed from that position for reasons unknown, was tweeting about you, saying that you have an ability to learn new heroes much more quickly than other players. Do you think that this is something that's true about you as a player?
Kinda. I did learn Doomfist like extremely fast. Same with May.
So you can, you obviously have a very broad hero pool. Is there some technique that you use this, or is it just coming naturally to you?
I just grind ranked a lot when I really want to like learn a new hero.
I suppose that's a good way to do it. So,
okay, who's the best Korean DPS?
No, we can go into the Doomfist stuff. Okay. So a lot of the times when you guys are picking Doomfist, you're picking it as part of a like Moira or tank heavy composition because you can get in there and get a lot of healing. And just, we've seen you pull it out on points like Control Center for Lijiang. When you need to push a cart a very small amount of the way, you'll often switch over back to the Doomfist because people have to fight you in very close range on the payload. Are there other situations where you feel like Doomfist is good? What prompts you to pull it out? I know you don't want to reveal all of your strategies, but is there a scenario that you look at in a game and you say, okay, this is where we need to use the Doomfist?
A lot of the times it's just like I need to get back fast.
Okay, that's also fair.
Perfectly.
But when you need to get back fast, it's often in overtime or something like that, where everybody does have to fight you in close range on the payload itself. And the fact that you are much better Doomfist than probably anybody. I think Effect is the only one who really could even come close to you in terms of Doomfist usage that I know about, unless people have been doing this in scrims or on the ladder and haven't used it in the professional games. It does give you guys a pretty big advantage.
Right. Not many people have like any experience playing against it either, since nobody else plays it.
Do you think it took people a while to figure out what to do against you then?
I feel like it's more like they haven't ever tried anything against it, so they can't just like instantly swap to something that's good against it.
what do you think is preventing more players from using Doomfist? Because you guys have found niche ways and niche strategies to use it very effectively. Because we saw Doomfist obviously in contenders with some frequency back before they changed his hitboxes. There's still a lot of bugs with the hero that I understand. Do you think that people are overlooking this as a possibility, or you think that most people just don't want to practice it because it's for niche situations?
I think most people are just scared.
They're scared of what?
Scared of dying, Monte. He already told you. He doesn't fear death. He doesn't fear the Reaper. Hydration does not fear the
too
Reaper.
good if you go Doomfist and then just die 5 lives straight without accomplishing anything.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go, Koreans, blown the fuck out. Maybe grow a pair and play some Doomfist like a true man, like a warrior, just fist hand-to-hand combat. Never mind weapons. Why you hand solo or something? You don't need weapons.
So back to the Korean DPS question. Do you want to circle back to that one now?
Who in your opinion is the best Korean DPS? Just from your own experience, doesn't have to be any sort. It's not a community award. You know, when you play against them, who seems like the hardest?
The scariest one is definitely Birdring.
Why is that?
He's quite flexible. Plays like Widow, Genji, Hog, and he's very, very good at using those heroes.
Yeah. Plus, now you know as well. Obviously, just has a really sick tank, doesn't he? So. Anyone can look good with one of those, so you know,
Right.
it's almost just unfair. It's just one time. But now you know his secret, so there you go. So basically, Birdring, if you want to be the best, maybe play Doomfist as well. You know, he's met you on even turf. Now you have to do your part. This is honor. This is the way we do things. So
I hope we do get to see some of that if you guys do end up meeting in the stage playoffs. But I think it's getting. Well, you guys can still both get there depending on the schedule. You guys obviously have a significantly harder schedule than Seoul or London for making the stage playoffs right now. So,
London has Shanghai Dragons and Fuel, so they have the easiest.
But London also likes to randomly drop maps because it seems like London as a team, they just sort of fuck around a lot of the time with their roster or their strategies. And then they like to play all of their players or test new things, or I don't know what they're doing with this roster. But when they actually seem to like go full on, that's the crazy thing about the Spitfire team is that when we saw them in the stage playoffs, they could just play 14 games of Overwatch in one day and win the stage playoffs, even though I don't think many people would have predicted that they would be able to pull that off. And then Seoul has yet to even win a map against London, and they've met twice now. They've been 4-0'd both times, pretty convincingly destroyed by the side of the London Spitfire. So it seems like when they actually try and put the prep in and play their best players, that they show up and they can dominate anybody. But it's just we don't see that every day. So even I'm skeptical about if they don't go sort of hard in this last week and get a lot of 4-0s, it's still possible that the Gladiators overtake them, or I should say continue to stay ahead of them.
Hydration. A week ago, when you beat Valiant and you beat London Spitfire, it was like probably the best week that your team's had in the Overwatch League. This week, still won all the games, but the opponents in theory were teams you were expected to beat. It was a lot closer. What do you think the last week was like? What was the difference?
This week we had like a few communication issues that like popped up in matches. A lot of like timings were slightly off, and it made us like straight up just lose the map just from it. Like on Volskaya against Outlaws, we were really gonna dive in. But then like translocator timing, and then it was like too late to cancel the jump, and then they ended up snowballing second point. And then on Gibraltar, when Jake backcapped, that like really snowballed Gibraltar as well.
Yeah, that Gibraltar match was really interesting because another thing that you guys do that you guys use Sombra more or on maps that other teams or on attacks that other teams typically don't. Like you guys like to use Sombra on attack on hybrid maps, and it's like you and the Shock do that, and not very many other teams. And then you were running the defensive Sombra on Gibraltar on that map and trying to play out of the server room, and it did look like there was a miscommunication there, but also it was the Outlaws playing smart around, because the thing is that when you're trying to push through point A on Gibraltar, the problem with you guys playing that composition right is if they're putting constant pressure on the cart and they have a Widowmaker, it's hard for you to get your tanks over to the payload to stop it if there's repeatedly a tracer there trying to just shove it away while they cover the sightlines, right? You have to like fly your tanks, your Diva and your Winston, you have to alternate them out of the server room and back to the health pack before you get the EMP, right?
Right.
So were you?
It's a bit hard to play that because you have to like really focus on both the car and like your EMP farm. So
right, and I feel like the Outlaws intelligently abused that. And if you guys are still not perfect in terms of your communication with Fissure, because we've heard Bishu say in interviews that he's translating a lot in the games itself.
Right.
Into Korean as they're playing in real time.
Yes.
Is it not hard enough for you already, Bishu? Oh, wait a minute. He's translating from Korean back. Which way is it that he's doing it mainly?
Both ways.
Both ways. Oh, fair enough. All right, easy does it then. Fucking hell.
That's why, like, in the first week, he wasn't, like, playing as well. He was a lot more focused on the translating. So there would be times where he just wouldn't do the right things because he was, like, just so focused on the translation.
Okay.
It's been getting a lot better.
So in that case, whenever
are you getting
communication problems, it's all Bishu. Come on, Bishu, pick it up, mate. All you do is press mouse one and fucking move at people. Or like, you don't actually ironically, you don't with Diva anymore. There's actually some skill to that champion now. Fair play.
But yes, I do understand why that would be an issue in some of these very communication heavy points, because if you're trying to play that way, you have to communicate where the EMP charge is at, and Fisher is trying to communicate when he's going on the payload to stop the tracer.
Yeah.
And you guys on that point were not. Oh, you were. Asher was playing the tracer. Obviously, he's still translating for Asher too, right? You weren't even playing in that.
Not as much, actually. Not for Asher.
Plus, apparently in Korean, like saying like "someone please kill Cool Matt" is like a real tongue twister. So it's like, it's tricky to get around. That's why that game was actually it was a lot closer than it should have been. You know, not bad. Listen, the meme gumbo is always there, Monte. I'm always adding a little something new, keep it fresh. You know,
just keeps on cooking the whole time.
I've got a question for you, Monte. This is a question for you, mate. Okay.
All right.
Right. When we do this show, how do you want it to mainly be like analytical, and are we going to mainly keep it, you know, somewhat with like a professional sheen, or do you want it like, okay, when I do my show with Richard in CS:GO by the numbers, we actually describe that as the realist podcast. So the concept is, if something happens that's a big story, we have to talk about it. We can't just not talk about it. So my question for you is, should it have the same remit on this show?
Don't we talk about everything? Have we been avoiding certain subjects?
Hydration plays for a team called the LA Gladiators, and they have a man called D-Pay in their organisation. So I was asking you, son, are we going to be real?
Sure.
Or are we just
I don't even know what the deal with that whole scenario was.
Let's
thought it was
find
ridiculous.
Let's find out, okay? Because, you know, I would be remiss for not bringing it up. Because here's the thing, this is the section of the show where we're focusing on Hydration on his team. We'll get to all the other teams later. We'll do all the analysis of the other ones. Here's the question, Hydration, can you give us a basic breakdown? What happened? Because all we know from the public is this game happened with the Houston Outlaws. After the game, D-Pay, your manager, coach, came out, he made a post. Was it during the game?
Oh, no. After the game, he made the post.
No. Yes, after the game, he made a post where he basically said, like, I apologize, you know, I like, sort of initiated physical contact with a player. He made it just sound like I touched them or something, pushed past them. And then here's the bizarre thing, okay? The way he apologized made people literally think he was memeing. Like, they assumed it was a joke and that he hadn't actually done this, and he was sort of playing up, all the recent apologies of everyone having to be like, I apologize for everything I've done, people thought that's what he was playing on. But the rumors are, in theory, that actually there was some sort of mild confrontation, and that he was actually doing this as damage control. I mean, by the way, fair play. He's the first person in the Overwatch League to figure out damage control exists. And no, damage control does not involve turning on your stream and making it way worse for yourself. That's the opposite. That's causing more damage, So Hydration, can you give us your thoughts on it? What's the basic story here? What happened?
I wasn't really there, so I didn't see it, but the way I like to imagine it, it was after the League Gen game, and I was playing Doomfist, He was just really impressed by my Doomfist play, and he wanted to roleplay.
Yes, there we go.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah, good one. I like it.
Thorin, we do talk about all of these. We just don't generally grill the people who obviously can't say anything about the subject.
He's here, mate.
Oh, you got a good joke out of it, though, so I appreciate that.
You said okay.
But I actually don't even know what happened with that. I think the whole thing just sounded utterly ridiculous to me. What was even worse was that when the obvious jokes started coming out of it, like London Spitfire making that great tweet that was just hilarious,
it was great, wasn't it?
They deleted it.
Do you know the reason why, though?
Stylosa's post on Twitter where he said that he was giving away $10,000 to charity or whatever because he looked at somebody incorrectly. Yes,
that was good. Do you know the side? Actually, this is a good opportunity. Maybe I can give you some insight here, because unfortunately, the reason why the London Spitfire guy deleted that tweet, right? First of all, is because on the surface, by the way, his tweet was just funny. Like, what happened was when they'd basically won a map, they just said something like, "Oh, sorry for bumping into you there," or whatever,
bumping you off the payload.
Yeah, which is obviously which is purely harmless, straight fire banter, which doesn't in any way insult or make like when they said it was unprofessional on Reddit. No, it isn't. But here's the thing. Just as a note for people who don't know, because this context is actually significant in this case, as far as I know, the person who does Twitter for the London Spitfire is the guy who used to do Twitter for the Immortals team. And he is a Brazilian guy who's into CSGO. And famously, he was actually fired by Immortals for doing a meme that referenced something edgy, which is where that KNG guy had said, "Prove it or I'll kill you." So he actually did a tweet like that from the Immortals Twitter account. And this is what's interesting, Monte. When he was fired, cause listen, that's definitely a lot more edgy than this one. But when he did it, again, it was just a joke. Jack actually did say on Twitter, I thought it was a good joke or something, I would hire this guy. And I believe he actually did hire him.
I think that's what happened.
But I think as a result, unfortunately, I imagine that guy's got something of PTSD anytime he launches a tweet that could be edgy, so understandable with that context, right?
I don't know if you're getting hired because, Jack is saying that you're great because you're doing this stuff. It may just have been a difference in company vision or culture. But yes, I thought it was very funny. And the thing is, now this is going to be a joke forever. I know Slasher was saying that it was intentional, or that the announcement was made because it was supposed to preempt Slasher writing a story about it, I guess. I don't know if that's true. I didn't talk to Slasher about it at all. I don't really care. It seems relatively innocuous either way to me. And it just seems ridiculous in terms of I just don't even understand why this had to go public at all at any point in time. This seems like something that could very easily be resolved internally to the league.
Yeah, with a fight club or something, yeah.
That would be fun. Overwatch League fight club.
But here's the thing, though, to keep it... Listen, first of all, obviously, these players...
But you can't make public announcements about Overwatch League Fight Club.
No, exactly.
That's the first rule.
These are the two things, Monty. One, it has to say private. Two... because these players, their hands are their livelihood. You're not allowed to use your hands. You have to tie your hands behind your back. You're only allowed to elbow and shoulder each other. There we go. Perfect. So I've even given him a fighting chance there, And then obviously, to solve this properly, it needs to be some sort of a 3-way cage match, since apparently he bumped into a bunch of players. So
I just don't even understand what the messaging behind this was, because we're coming off this mad drama week that happened the previous week, and There's a lot of people who are complaining that the league is being too harsh for the fines and suspensions. And then like this comes out, which makes it's just like a terrible look after that last week to have somebody. It just seems so farcical, right? Like you said, it almost looked like satire. And then to have it be real, I think it's not great PR for the Overwatch League. And it's interesting because, you know, I hadn't heard anything about this before this came out. And obviously it wasn't a discussion point within the league at all. So it just came out of left field for me. It's bizarre. Okay. And I don't know. I've never been told by Overwatch League that I can or can't say anything or had them be mad at me for saying things.
Plus, if you had, you wouldn't be able to say.
Well, I could say like they told me not to do something, but that hasn't happened.
Well, what if they told you not to tell us that they told you not to say anything?
Well, I guess I mean I would just be honest about it. It doesn't,
what if they told you not to be honest? I question everything, Monte. I can't. You know,
I think there's enough evidence of my character that exists in the public to know that I probably wouldn't be too happy if I was told something like that.
Yeah. Plus, you did personally ban XQC, so I mean, you're directly involved with all of it.
It was definitely my
Twitter told me. I just keep track. Listen, you know me, Monte. I keep my ear to the streets, and I just want the pulse of the community. So whatever the community tell me, I just trust that it's true.
Clearly, what I would do is I would go running to Blizzard about a tweet that XQC made and try to force them to dispense justice. See, Duncan, I prefer to be the punisher. I like to dispense justice myself. And I felt like I did a pretty good job of dispensing justice on Twitter against XQC. So I was fine with what happened, you know. I don't want him to be fined or banned for what he said about the casting, but I don't get to make those decisions.
I believe DP feels the same way, but anyway, that's that segment of the show finished now. Hydration did a good job. He played it off with a joke. He kept stum. He let us talk. Now he's ready for the hardcore analysis. So let's go into some. So the team on all the past episodes, Hydration, that everyone was telling us should be the best, should actually win this stage, is the Seoul Dynasty. And the Seoul Dynasty played the two other Korean teams this week and lost both games. New York Excelsior one at least was close. The London one, not particularly close. What do you think of the Seoul Dynasty in this current meta, this stage right now? What do you think of this team?
I think they're like really, really strong.
Did you expect them to be the best?
Kinda. I didn't expect them to lose 2 games or 2 matches.
You mean to lose both of the matches?
Yeah.
This past week?
Like I expected like maybe 1, but not 2.
I do think that when it comes to Seoul, so the problem that Seoul has had is that so in stage 1, they had to play London and New York in the same week. And then in stage 2, they had to play London and New York in the same week. And I think and also this past week, if you look at the other opponents that these teams had, so London had to play the Shock and New York had to play Shanghai Dragons. So
Conspiracy?
Both of those teams that they had to play could get away with probably very little prep versus the Shock or the Dragons and focus almost entirely on Seoul. And Seoul has to prepare for 2 opponents that are almost 100% preparing for them and play them back to back. So
I'm calling conspiracy, Monte, because here's the thing.
And they have to do the same shit in stage 1. Like it's like ridiculous. That scheduling, I don't know about that.
What happened is this, Monte. I'll explain the conspiracy theory, okay, right? So because Seoul Dynasty, everyone knows coming into the Overwatch League, everyone's hyping up all these Koreans. Oh, the Koreans are the best. The Koreans are going to win all the time. So the Overwatch League was like, really? Well, you know what? Let's see if that's true. So they set up this schedule, and you know what? Those Koreans, those highfalutin fancy Koreans.
Oh, they were split over 2 weeks in the last one. Excuse me. Sorry.
Well, for the sake of the joke, we'll keep it. We'll pretend that it wasn't. Right. So what happened was these Koreans that you've hyped up so much came over with their hubris and their arrogance, believing they would win. And those plucky guys from New York were like, "Hey, forget about it." And then they beat them, and then they went straight into playing those Brits, those brave British Bulldogs, and were like, "Oi, blimey, mate, you bloody will not win this game," because that's apparently how Americans think British watch people speak. So there you go. The Koreans actually aren't that good, Monte. I've solved it with a narrative fitting of LoL esports.
So
at least 3 years ago, anyway. Fair play. It's probably decent now, actually.
So they did have to play them in back-to-back games, but it was split over 2 weeks last time, so they did have more time to prepare. But the results were still the same. It was a 3-2 win to New York and a 4-0 win to London each of these times. And I understand why that happened in stage one, and I thought that I think Seoul would have won one of those matches had they not been in the same week. And I'm interested to see what happens this next week if they go to the stage playoffs, even though they would have to move above the Gladiators to do that at this point in time. And their matches are versus Florida and Houston, so there's still a possibility that could occur. But I think Seoul, in the last patch when they had the Mercy, they were definitely not at their strongest. In this patch, I was a little bit more surprised, but SaBLB showed up in a big way and clutched it out at the end in the New York match. And then London, I just think that this is a terrible stylistic matchup for Seoul because they have such trouble keeping their supports alive right now. And both New York, I talked about this last week, but I thought New York would pressure Jaehong in particular, and they played a lot of dive. And I think that London is such an exceptionally skilled team at diving, and when they saw how New York won, they realized that they could do what New York did even better than New York, and decided that they were going to go all in on that backline, and Toby and Jaehong were just dying instantly basically every fight. So I think that Seoul's biggest problems right now are that their supports are not able to defend themselves very well, and coupled with the fact that we don't see Miro and Zunba peeling for them effectively. And when you're trying to get bird ring, profit, and gesture off your backline, you have to provide a ton of peel for those supports, or you're just going to continue to suffer in the way that we saw Seoul suffer this past week.
Mate, in that series, Gesture had 43 kills.
Yeah.
If the tank's going to do that, it's going to be pretty hard to deal with, right?
Yeah, and again, almost if you actually go back and look at the film, almost all of those fights were Jaehong or Toby dying first. And I think that shows a lot of problems. Now, I'm interested to see, so you guys, as in the Gladiators, beat London, but you lost to Seoul. So what were the factors you think were in your defeat hydration to Seoul? Like, what did you find difficult to play against them? Because you guys were playing dive. I mean, you know, you were playing dive on Hanamura.
They're just like very, very coordinated. Like everybody in their team just seemed to be like on the same page at all times.
I think that has been Seoul's strength, because we heard Reinforce likes to say this on the desk, but we talk about Seoul's fundamentals, and their teamwork is very good when it comes to stalling out objectives. That's why they have such a great win rate on Assault, and they're so good at it, is because their stall on points is crazy good. Like, they're just able to cycle people and hold the point in a losing battle. I mean, they'll eventually lose it, but they're able to stall much better than any other team in the league at the current time. And their ult economy is generally quite strong as well. But I guess for Seoul, what's interesting is that we're seeing potentially some flaws in their individual play. I don't think Jaehong is playing at the level that he used to on the Zenyatta, and he's not playing Ana anymore. It's Toby, because they want to run both of these heroes simultaneously, and I guess they don't want to run. I guess they think Toby's shot calling or other intangibles are more important than bringing Guido to play Zen and having Jaehong play the Ana, which maybe they'll try. I don't know. They also have Gambler now, and they haven't played him yet. Even though obviously he's more of a Lucio and Mercy player. So I'm curious what they're going to do when it comes to maybe swapping out some of their support players or trying to mix it up or get Jaehong back on Ana, figure out who else can play Zenyatta, if it's Guido or maybe somebody else will practice it on the sports. But from an individual capacity, I don't think they are as skilled as other players. Like Fleda's great, but Fleda and Munchkin combined are not better than Birdring and Prophet combined when it comes to DPS, and they don't have the same versatility. Munchkin, as a player, is a great tracer, but his ability to play other picks is not amazing, which also doesn't give Soul a lot of compositional diversity compared to other teams. Like, you pretty much know what they're going to play. Munchkin's going to play McCree or Widow or Tracer, and mostly Fleda's going to be on the Widow, so you don't even really consider that. And then Fleda basically has to play absolutely everything else in order to create different.
Did you think he actually had a worse week as well? Or was that a factor of the rest of the team not allowing him to pop off as much? What did you think?
I mean, it's hard to have a good week when your supports are dead. Like, that's the fastest way to lose a fight, right? You just can't. It's a battle of attrition at that point, and you have no healing. So it's hard to look good when there's no healing for anybody on the team. Killing supports almost always ends a team fight instantly. Like, you just have to keep them alive. Like, so for example, if you lose a tank player or you lose one of your DPS, there's still the opportunity for your other DPS player to sort of pop off if all of the healing resources are then going into that player to keep them alive. But you can focus down somebody so easily with how powerful Orb of Discord is from Zenyatta. Like, you can basically just like blow somebody up instantaneously if they don't have any crowd control or healing that's supporting them from your backline. So it's a lot harder to live or to create the space to win a fight when you're down a player if it's your supports that are dead. If that makes sense.
Okay. Right. Hydration.
Do you agree with that, Hydration?
Yeah. What do you think?
Pretty much how it works, yeah.
What is it like in your team then? Because obviously your supports are pretty significant, right? They were actually the main players that everyone was bigging up last split stage. Whatever.
All right.
I don't think this terminology.
Keep them alive.
Indeed. What do you think about the New York Excelsior then? Because this is a team that, okay, the only game they lost was that rematch of the Stage 1 final against London. And aside from that, they have been outrageous. They've won 27 maps this stage so far. What do you think of the New York Excelsior?
I think they're probably the best team. They're very scary. All of their players are insane.
Do you think that they are a better team than London? And by the way, you don't play New York this stage, so have you been scrimming them a lot recently because you're not playing them in stage 2?
Yeah, we have.
So have they been like your main scrim partners?
Yeah, and like they're always like really, really strong. Like, if you were to ask who the weakest player in that team is, like I don't even know where to start. Like, they're all just that good.
What do you think it is about New York that makes them, in your mind, the best team? Like, what is the defining characteristic? How are they better? Like, what is the one category? Is it their coordination? Is it an individual player? Like, what really puts them over the top in your eyes?
I think it's like a mix of both. Like, you're insanely coordinated with like very talented players.
I mean, last week, like I said on the last episode, when you consider Libero as literally just like a little luxury just sprinkled on top, like that fucking Salt Bay meme or something, like, how many heroes does this guy play? What, just everything? It's unreasonable, isn't it? He plays more DPS heroes than like most of the main DPS players in the league. It's unfair. Yeah. And they're going to get Flower as well. I think there should be some sort. Can people start like shoulder barging New York players or talking shit to them or getting them on? Can we make them stream or something? We've got to fucking limit this team. Come on. I need, Nate, you've got to pull out your Roger Goodell impression and get this fucking team nerfed. This is unfair. They can't have this many players and have Flower as well.
Yeah, and they haven't even been playing Pine either this stage, hardly at all. So they've basically just been sticking with 7 players. It's been their core 6, and then they put Jonas in for hybrid maps. So he plays one map a match, basically. and otherwise it's just been the same 6 players. So I find it interesting that they're doing this strategy. They've said, I don't believe what they say, because they yes, that's true. But they use the word.
And they're speaking in English.
They use the word condition to just Pine has bad condition right now. But what condition? So in Korean, they literally use the English word condition, but that could mean absolutely anything from like poor physical health to lack of focus to bad attitude. It's literally like the catch-all phrase that they use when they say that somebody is not in playing form. So I don't know what it is about Pine. They said later that he was homesick or something, but that also sounded weird. So I don't know. I mean, Pine...
Just have him fly back to New York, no problem.
Pine's a very confident guy. He's not exactly reserved or, I think, easily flustered. So it surprises me to hear that homesickness would be the cause of him not playing.
Here's the thing, Monte. Some people, they just don't show it, On the outside, they're all smiles, they're all jokes, They seem very lively. That's because they're giving energy to others to keep them going, But who gives them support? Who makes them smile? Have you ever asked yourself that one? When do you make Pine smile? Yeah, it's just all take with you, isn't it? All the jokes, all the memes.
I would love to make Pine smile. He warms my heart whenever I see him on stage. I really like watching him play.
But actually, this ties back into what we were saying, Monte. There again is an example of why the New York team is so good. They don't even play Pine. He would be a starting player on minimum 8 of the other teams in the league.
I think he is a specialist. I think they're using him in an intelligent way. I guess
in their team, sure, but on another team, he would surely start. At least half the teams in the league.
Yeah, I think as a hit scan player, I don't know. His tracer's not necessarily top tier, but in general, I think you could probably slot him into quite a few rosters. However, on New York, I think he does the specialist job very well. I was surprised that given his dominance on Ilios and how well Ilios suits his hero pool, that they would not play him in some of these tiebreaker matches, like the map 5s. So, but apparently there is some other reason why he is not being played, which is being obfuscated by New York.
They don't treat him with unconditional love. Hydration. Do they use Pine when they scrim against you?
I don't think so.
Homie can't even get in scrims. This condition must be so bad, Monte. He must be in used condition, ear marks, missing second page. Not fresh, not mint condition.
Hopefully they'll buff him back up to mint condition Pine soon. So speaking of DPSs, you guys have a very interesting system as we're talking about swapping out player.
Yes.
So you guys probably swap DPS more than any other team in the league. And I think you guys do it well because it's oftentimes based around the hero pool for a given map. For example, we've seen a lot of Asher and Surefour on Gibraltar because that's a map where you often see a lot of Widow Tracer or you see Widow Genji, which I suppose you would be better at if they were to play Asher and you or Surefour and you on that map. But you guys have been playing primarily the Tracer and the Widowmaker with some Sombra, which usually Surefour plays on your team or Big Goose on occasion. So when do you go in on these maps? Does it change from stage to stage? Because it doesn't really change from week to week.
It's really all about what we find the most successful.
And so are you saying when you're scrimming, you are often scrimming on, you guys are switching out. So sometimes you play Gibraltar and scrims, you just sort of see what works the best.
Yeah.
And do you continue experimenting throughout the stage or by this point, have you pretty much decided what you're going to do on these maps for this patch and you're trying to lock in or refine those strategies?
It's a little mix up. Sometimes you want to try new things.
So in terms of trying new things, how often do you guys actually scrim Ilios?
twice a day.
How does that actually work when you do a scrim? Like, do you already decide before you do the scrim what the maps are going to be? Do you just each pick a map when you play? Do you pretend it's a real match and play one of each? How do you normally do it?
You just alternate just by picking.
Okay, so you just get to a turn to pick the map that you want to play, etc., or that you're practicing for this week or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I've never actually heard anyone address that. I wondered how it was done.
Yeah, it is weird, and also, Thorin, that's why having an internal team to scrim is such a big advantage, because sometimes when you're trying to find scrim partners, not every team plays all 8 maps in a given week. So sometimes you end up having to play on maps that you don't need to practice necessarily for that week. Obviously, you'll be playing them at some point over the stage.
Sure.
So having an internal team can be helpful, like having a full 12-player roster so that you can actually scrim these things internally as well and play only on the map pool, or at least supplement it with some more of those games. Have you guys been scrimming against your contenders team?
Yeah, like twice a week.
Is that helpful for you, or?
Yeah, it's when we like try funky things out.
Who's the best player on the contenders team?
That's hard. Either Gods or Panker, I think.
Reasonable picks. I'm sort of surprised Gods didn't find his way into an Overwatch League team, but I'm sure that will probably happen in the future as the league expands. So when you're coming into Ilios, we have to talk about the strategy that you used on Ruin. So, right. Because I understood why you guys were doing this with your particular roster, because 2 out of the 3 points are much better to have you and Asher on, right? But the problem is that you run into is that you want to run Widow Tracer on Ruins, but you are not a Tracer player or a Widow player. So that meant that Shaz, who has occasionally played Genji in the past with a single support for you guys, had to go onto the Tracer, and you were left with the Lucio, right? In a triple DPS composition, where Big Goose was playing the Sombra. So was this something you guys had practiced extensively and had planned to use coming into this if it went to map 5?
Yeah, we only practiced that twice actually. But it's something like we were successful with, so we were just like, why not try it? Might as well do it.
Do you ever practice Lucio?
I have like an account in Rank that I just always fill on, and like 90% of the time that means I'm playing Lucio. And since it's solo queue, I'm playing Lucio like a DPS. I don't appeal for the supports at all, so it fit perfectly. It fits perfectly with that playstyle of having.
Yes, now they know how it feels.
So you guys also tend to run triple DPS more than most teams. That was sort of your defining feature as a team coming into Overwatch League. Why do you choose to run triple DPS more than most, such as in this situation?
That was something like we started trying because Bishu was sick, and then we didn't have a diva to play with. So you were just running triple DPS on every map, and we found some success with it.
Just happenstance, Monte. Just see, the thing about them is they're anti-fragile. The more things go wrong, the better it gets for them.
It's true. They roll with the punches well.
Yeah, you won't see any cracks appear, even though they do have a fissure.
That's a terrible fucking joke.
It was half decent. It was not bad. I was working what I could there. Just crowbarring it in, right? So, what about this then? So let me think. We talked about Seoul, New York Excelsior. Did we actually talk about London Spitfire? I don't think we did. We talked about when you played them. So you've already played London Spitfire, obviously, and beaten them this split. They are the champions. By process of elimination, you already said New York's the best. You thought Seoul was going to win at least one of these games. Do you think that Spitfire is not going to win stage 2?
I think they will actually.
Right, now I have no idea where I am. I'm out. I'm pulling back. I tried adding them all together. The equation doesn't make sense. The equation doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't. It's like...
So what is it? What quality do they have that would make you think they'd win then?
They're just really good against the other Korean teams.
That is true. Yeah, that is pretty good quality to have in the Overwatch League, it turns out, actually.
Yeah, you know what's funny is, like, I think right now it's going to be obviously interesting to see which of those 3 teams in the Gladiators make it into the stage playoffs. Because if London doesn't make it into the stage playoffs, I actually think Seoul has a pretty good chance of winning it, considering how close that match was last time both times against New York. But if London gets in, I think New York has a much better chance of winning it, because if London has to play Seoul again in the matchup immediately before the finals, I think they're just going to body Seoul one more time, because I don't think there's enough adaptation that Seoul can do fast enough to fundamentally stop how badly they were beaten by the Spitfire. So in that case, I think New York has a significantly better chance of winning. So it's fascinating to see. And also, by that same token, now we didn't see much of London, the A team of London. We only got to see a couple of maps of the A team of London against the Gladiators. But if they can play them that close again, even with the A team, then Gladiators might even have a better shot than Seoul. Seoul is just, their supports are so vulnerable right now. And I think they've been exposed in many ways at the end of this stage by New York, and then followed up on by London, that I'm not sure they're going to be able to fix their problems keeping Jaehong and Toby alive in time for the stage playoffs.
If that is the A team, then Gesture would be probably Hannibal, right? Because he always had the plans. He's the guy who made it all come together. Yeah, he did. Who would be B.A. Baracus, though? That's the real question. Probably got to be a DPS player or something, right?
I guess so. Who would be Mr. T?
Yeah, who would that be in there too? maybe Birdring?
Always pitying fools.
Yeah, seems like he has a pretty good attitude.
Maybe Prophet, who is the one who's like flipping off the camera, would have
Although
more
actually,
swagger.
No, Monte, I've fucked up, haven't I? Ironically, none of them would be Mr. T, right? Because famously, he didn't ever want to get on planes, and they have a London Spitfire. So I have fucked up the whole theme. The aesthetic doesn't make any sense. I'm going to back slowly out of this one and apologise for my behaviour in making this joke about the Overwatch League. And anyway, right, okay. So what about this then? Hydration. So far, we've talked about some really good teams. One of the most depressing teams in the league for this stage for me has to be the Houston Outlaws, because everything looked so good coming into the stage. Everything looked good at the beginning of the stage. Now everything looks terrible. What do you think of the Houston Outlaws? What are their problems?
I feel like they haven't been able to adapt to the patch that well.
What changed?
Obviously the Junkrat and Mercy changes. They were very strong with those heroes, and now they just aren't. Those heroes just aren't that good anymore, or as good. They're still played pretty often.
What do you think of a guy called Jake's Tracer?
It's no Shaz Tracer, but it's up there.
I like it. Self-deprecating towards everyone. Well done.
So you played the close series against the Outlaws, though, and Outlaws did legitimately look better when they were playing against you. It looked like they had at least gotten, they took the first map off of you playing Hanamura. They also managed to take Watchpoint Gibraltar in what was a very dominant showing by them. Like that map in particular was super one-sided. You were not, obviously we discussed this earlier, playing in that map. Do you think that there is a chance the Houston Outlaws are going to be coming back? Are you on the same page with me, where I think they need to sign like a dedicated Tracer player that is capable of holding his own on a lot of these maps, especially when there's players like Davin who used to play with Linkser on Giganti float that are free agents right now, or even bringing in a Korean player like Stitch. Where do you think this Outlaws roster needs to go to fix their flaws?
Yeah, they definitely do need a tracer, and if they do get one, they're definitely going to be strong again and a very scary team.
Monte, did you see, speaking of good trash talk, did you see Dante from the
That was
Shocks comment?
amazing.
So what happened was, after the game against the Outlaws, he said in a tweet, managed to demech Coolmat numerous times, obviously referencing Flame. Listen, Flame gave it the all college try, attempting to defend Jake by pointing out that he had like demeched Coolmat twice or something. Like, you know, like how far are you reaching here, Flame? Listen, love you, mate, but come on, man. Like, that's good banter. I like that.
He's doing his job as a DM and standing up for his players, but I do think that. So the problem that Flame is having right now, and is that Flame himself doesn't have access to a lot of the stats, right? Because those are. It's been a problem that we don't have as much stats access as I think the teams or the casters would like, given the way that these stats are currently gathered for reasons I will not bore you with, technical reasons that are going to change soon to help give better stats to everybody, to put stats on the website, et cetera, et cetera. But there have been technical reasons why it's been difficult to get these stats out there. So the problem is that Flame looked at stats that we had used that was ranking like Clockwork and Jake towards the bottom of tracers, and then said, well, of course it looks bad because, you know, Clockwork only plays on assault maps. However, when we then had Captain Planet, our stats guy, run the stats on assault maps of tracers only, Clockwork still was at the bottom. And at that point, if you're making like some sort of stylistic argument, there's like a sort of a limit to how much the team's style will really affect that tracer. So I don't think there is no truth in what Flame was saying, but it definitely wasn't like as, let's say, stylistic or one-sided as he made it sound based on the fact that Clockwork only plays assault. There are definitely like a lot of comparisons that can be made between Clockwork, and not all tracers going to have great stats. For example, last stage, Dante and Baby Bay were two of the highest damage DPSs in terms of damage per 10 minutes. But San Francisco, obviously, you wouldn't look at that and be like, these are the best players. The problem was that they spent so much of their time shooting tanks that they were getting a lot of damage, but they were just like shooting the front line. The front line was getting healed, and they were like charging enemy supports. So certainly there's a lot of context around Overwatch stats that has to be justified. I agree with Flame on this one. However, I do disagree with these particular stats and saying that they don't need a tracer player, because they do. And hilariously, I don't know if you saw this, Thorin, the Houston Outlaws press conference with Muma and Linkser, they also said they needed a tracer player.
They did? Okay.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
There's clearly
they weren't on message, were they?
Some level of disconnect there in the old messaging of the Houston Outlaws. I found that pretty amusing, but I don't think it's rocket science to know that they have to improve their tracer play, whether it's through improvement of one of their existing players or getting somebody else. And there's not really a reason not to do it either, because you have roster room. Just do it. What's the problem?
Plus, like, this is another thing. Like, first of all, I have noticed a bunch of people who are in like management type positions in teams have been running with this narrative of like, don't blame one person. Well, yeah, you're right. Don't blame one person. But that also does not mean that nobody is to blame and that the entire team is. Like, I don't think Linkser is fucking all these games up somehow. So, child, please. Like, listen, what the point here is, especially on something like Tracer, you have to actually be really good. You can't just be, like, here's the angle you should have gone with, Flame. I think actually that he is a top 10 Tracer player in the Overwatch League. Would be garbage, wouldn't it? I wouldn't mean anything. So it doesn't matter even if he's 10th best in the world, mate. You need one who's probably top 6 or something, don't you? You need someone who's actually good. Well, and then it would actually free Jacob to do something else, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and they still have a roster slot open. They have 11 players. And also we can ask questions such as, where is Mendo? And I think a lot of the fans are frustrated.
Just on Twitter. He's just tweeting. He's still seeing it. He's still out there, don't worry. No problem.
Why not? Do you ever play against Mendo when you play the Outlaws and scrims? Their hydration. Have you seen Mendo in a Houston scrim ever?
The last time I saw him was like at the Player Summit, I think.
Where in the world is Mendo, aside from on Twitter? Mendo, please turn on your location setting on Twitter and when you tweet. I just want to know where it says.
So you haven't even seen, what you're saying is you haven't seen him in a scrim, have you?
Right.
Have you seen him at the studio?
Not that I can remember.
Because I haven't seen him. So I don't know where he is a lot of the time. I think it's very odd. Have you seen him in ranked queue? Have you been in games with Mendo?
I've seen him once. And he was like dueling with someone.
All right, so maybe I don't even know what he's up to then. But
I mean, I would make a joke like, why don't some of the other teams in the league sign him? But obviously, he's played with about 90% of the players.
I think that if you're not going to use Mendo, you should just drop him so you can free up roster space. But regardless of all of this, they still have an open spot. They only have 11 players signed right now. They could theoretically bring somebody else in, and they could also, if they want to bring in somebody else to fill out their 12th slot, it does seem to me like if you're not going to be using one of your players ever at all, and nobody even knows where in the world he is, and he's not scrimming with you, then perhaps you should just cut him and therefore free up some room to somebody who can actually provide you some value. So I don't know. I think it's weird. The signing window is closing at the end of this stage, I believe. So there's like a week left, I think, to sign players. It might be the beginning of stage 3. Forever, till the end of the season.
What? Mate, at least half these teams are just doing nothing in the rest of the Overwatch league. You know what? As soon as the signing window ends,
what's that?
I think it's the end of stage 3.
It's the end of stage 3. Okay. Yeah. That would be much better. That's not as bad.
That's too bad. I was going to make a video where I would literally be like the doomsayer of the Overwatch League, and I'd get like that ancient Greek voting system of the black ball and the white ball, and I would just drop in.
There were pebbles.
Yeah, whatever. I'd just drop in the black ones for like to say, yeah, you're just done. Like your team's, if you haven't signed any more players, your team is done forever, mate. It's over for you.
You know, they in ancient Athens, they literally used to ostracize people by doing that. Like once a year, they would have a vote to like kick somebody out of Athens, and then everybody could vote to banish someone.
All I'm saying, Dallas Fuel, Houston Outlaws, is this system could work. There's still time. You don't listen, just like that system, it's democracy. You all just put in the thing. No one sees what you put in. That's another factor. I believe they did it like secret. I think you all did it separately, and you just came out and did the votes. You don't know who voted for what, so you don't have to know that.
You didn't. Sure. It wasn't like you had to come in separately. You literally just had like a pebble in your hand that nobody could see, and you put your hand into a jar and dropped the pebble in, so nobody can know what pebble you had.
I think the system's got legs to it. It's got legs. And then alternatively,
ancient Athens.
Yeah. And then the other way you could do it is if you ever need to get rid of a really troublesome character who's just messing up the team, have him drink hemlock. That was a joke. I apologize for my inference that a player would be forced to drink poison and would die. But ironically, he did also somewhat corrupt the youth. Not of Athens, but of the Overwatch community. So I think that ties back in the end. Not bad.
That's actually an incredible analogy.
Wasn't bad. Right, hydration. Let's talk about another team. So who do you think, right, of the teams we've gone past so far? Obviously, your team is the one that's killing it. The other team that people will look to as the best Western team is probably Philadelphia Fusion, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And obviously, you have to play them in this coming week. So what do you think of the Philadelphia Fusion?
It's going to be a very tough match. They're looking really scary.
I mean, you have just bigged up Echo and said he's EQO and said he's the best DPS.
Right.
So you're going head-to-head with him.
Him and Carpe are just a very strong duo.
Well, if they play Carpe, but I assume they will play Carpe this week. It looked like they were just giving Snillo some of the easier matches this past week to work with, and then we'll bring Carpe back in. So when you talk about EQO being the best, what impressed you about him? Because he obviously recently came over after stage 1, so you've only been playing against him a little bit, right? He was over on the European server before that. So this is your first time really meeting EQO. What about his play? Because you guys play many of the same heroes. Is there something about him that you respect or admire or you've noticed about his play?
He's very, very flexible, and he's like really good on like every hero he plays.
Is there something about his Genji that is different than yours? Some way he plays it?
Like every time like I run into him in ranked, he's always like playing insane. Like,
his Widowmaker's pretty fucking
strong
nuts.
Widow. Yeah. He like misses.
He was like never died in any of those matches. It was pretty nice. Reminded me of like Taimu about a year ago.
I hope we get that. I hope we get that Taimu back
before he was a tank or trying to be a tank. One of the two. I don't know which one it is.
Trying.
You know, Monte.
I find the Dallas feel quite trying right now. Overall,
someone needs to work that into a meme. Like, you know that one they always do from Star Wars: The Revenge of the Sith, where it's like, you know, did you ever hear the legend of Darth Plagueis?
That was the prequel.
Yeah,
so
yes, they need to do one of those that's like about Taimu. Like, he predicted that a tank would be the most important role in the game, but he couldn't keep himself from that. Like, whatever. I haven't thought it all through, have I? But you can see where I'm going with it, because eventually he became a tank, didn't he? And was sort of costing the team. I mean, it's not his fault, but it is as well. It's not his fault he's in that position, but when he was in that position, he didn't help himself. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, that's the Dallas Fuel. Let's go back to the Philadelphia Fusion. Back into them. What do you think of Echo or EQ or Monte? I'm just going to keep calling him Echo because I think it's a better name. But
yeah, well, I don't know why it doesn't go by Echo or Eco. It's a nightmare to say and to cast. But anyway, I think he's been fantastic. It really has improved the Fusion. I think that not only has it been, from talking to the Fusion, not only has it been a big flexibility upgrade, because obviously Shadowburn is a great player, but he's more of a specialist on the Genji and the Pharah. And
to me, you use him more like they use Libero in New York Excelsior. You know, you definitely got these mad skills on certain things, but there's not. You don't have to necessarily start.
I'm sorry, you cut out. Use him more like what?
Like Libero on New York.
Well, I mean, we'll use EQO that way because he's hugely versatile, right? Okay. Shadowburn is very specialized on like a couple of heroes, and he's obviously been a top tier player for a long time. But from talking to the Fusion, it also seems like EQO offers other intangibles, such as a lot more communication in game and shot calling abilities. So I think that he's probably helping out the front line quite a bit with that, because Fraggy's performance has also looked better when he's been in the game. So it seems like he's better at coordinating with his tank than Shadowburn is, at least in the given time. Plus, like you say, he offers so much versatility. Being able to swap back and forth between the projectile and the Widowmaker in this meta is super useful because that way you can have your tracer specialist play. So for example, let's think about like different DPS combinations that you could have, right? If you have a great Widowmaker who's also a great Genji, and you have a great tracer who's also a great Widowmaker, at any given point in time, you can play tracer Widowmaker, you can switch the Widowmaker over to your tracer player and have EQO play Genji. You can play tracer Genji and play dive. It just gives you so many different options for what you can do that I think he offers a lot. And we saw Shadowburn in week 2 of stage 2 when EQO wasn't playing for a week. I think they were still testing things, but we saw some of Shadowburn's Widow, and it wasn't anywhere near as good as EQO's. So I think that with this map set, that kind of versatility really helps you out because you don't have to make any player substitutions in order to do that. So I think he's like has the right hero pool at the right time, and also is providing other intangibles to the roster that they didn't have before.
Okay. Hydration, what do you think of the LA Valiant? Because this last week was not a good one for them. They lost to the Florida Mayhem and Boston Uprisers. So where's this team at?
They were pretty strong last stage, and they were playing Silk Thread a lot. But now they stopped playing him, and they almost never win games.
Do you have any? Could you speculate why you think they would take him out of the lineup? I mean, he was kind of hyped as like, oh, look at this hot young talent, you know.
There's all those like inside LA Valiant videos. They like talk about like what's going on with them.
What did they say?
But Silkthread is never in them. He's never mentioned. It's
he's
like
the Mendo of their team, right? I see. Okay.
He's been Mendoed.
Yeah, he's gone into the Mendo black hole, right? What do you think, Monte? What's gone wrong with the Valiant?
Well, I think they had a lot of internal turmoil, obviously getting rid of their coach, and they're getting a new coach now. And with swapping up roles, I guess I get to a certain degree why you would want to have Kareev in, again, for similar reasons. He was often playing Widowmaker on Junkertown in stage 1 when they needed a Widow to pair with Soon's Tracer, because they didn't have a Widow that wasn't Soon. So if you wanted to play Widow and Tracer simultaneously, they had to go with Kareev a lot of the time, because it's not a hero that Agilities or Silk Thread was very well known for. And so I think Kareev just has a bigger hero pool and can service more of the situations. Like, he basically has Silk Thread's hero pool, except he can also play Widow and Genji. Well, I mean, Silk Thread can play Genji, but he basically can play Widow and Agilities, and he can play Roadhog. And Agilities can play the Genji and the Roadhog, but not necessarily coming in and being able to play Soldier or any of the longer range hit scans. So I think he offers more versatility, but I'm really not convinced that this is like...
Isn't losing him as a support the issue, though?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not convinced that this is a great long-term answer. I think that you want him to go back to support, and you get a different DPS player. I mean, they did play Agilities some in their last match, so...
He's been looking pretty good, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he came back and looked pretty good. So, but they still ended up losing to Boston. It was a super close match, it has to be said. I think they just don't have an answer to all of their issues. Verbo has come in, but Verbo individually has not been outstanding on the Lucio, which is what he was brought in for in the first place. I think Fate and Envy are still fine on this roster. Soon is obviously still playing well. I think it's a matter of figuring out how exactly they want to play with their supports, and also if they could sign another DPS player, I think that would be ideal.
What do you think of the DPS players, Hydration, on LA Valiant? Because I've got a bunch, obviously.
I feel like if they had like a rotation of like Soon, Jodies, I think it'd be the best for them. Similar to something like my team has going.
Actually start rotating the Agilities in, because he's a better Genji than Kareev is. So for the Genji maps, at least.
Yeah.
I can see that. I think that may be something that's a possibility for them. And it looks like they've already started to do that to a degree. But they've also... I mean, what I find the most frustrating thing about the Valiant is, like, it's always overtime pushes. They will just sit there and lose fights and lose fights and lose fights. And finally, when it gets to the last possible second for them to do something and they have to all in and it's overtime, they succeed. They can push a payload super far in overtime. When they are forced to play all in, they are at their best. But for whatever reason, they are scared to all in a lot of the time. So you end up with them just like playing too passively, but when they're forced to do it, they look good. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It seems like a confidence issue or a shot calling issue with the team, that they don't want to play in that sort of desperation mode all the time. But when they do get into overtime, they can clutch it out. And I think that's been true for them in stage 1. It continues to be true for them in stage 2. I think that they need to figure out what's going on in those overtime pushes and figure out how to make that the consistent mode of play across, every second of every map.
What do you make of the Boston Uprising at the moment, Hydration? Obviously started the stage pretty badly, but they've been getting a bunch of wins recently. What do you think of this team?
They're a strange team. They're pretty strong, but like, it feels like they're just somewhat inconsistent at times.
What are their biggest strengths?
Their tanks and DPS are definitely like the stronger part of the team. Like Gamsu and Striker are just always working together really well.
Who's better out of Striker and Dreamcasper?
I'd say Striker, but Dreamcasper's more flexible.
I think
Come on, what's going
Dreamcasper.
on?
I think he reminds me a lot of you because both of you guys were relatively unknown players on sort of like B tier contenders teams, and you in particular were known as sort of a far one trick. So was Dreamcasper, and both of you have expanded and improved massively ever since last year. And I agree. I think Dreamcasper is looking good. I think honestly, a lot of Boston's problems were the fact that Gamsu just decided to take a vacation or whatever bullshit reason they gave, letting him have a holiday.
His condition wasn't good enough.
His condition wasn't good, so he had to go to Korea to have a holiday, I guess. It's like,
I apologize for my
that was-
condition not being good enough.
We talked about this last time, right? Where
Yeah.
it was like, oh,
It didn't make any sense.
excuse me, we just practiced through Christmas, so now Gamsu needs a holiday. It's like, why don't you just take the holiday when you don't have matches? Doesn't make any fucking sense. But whatever the real reason was behind Gamsu leaving, having him gone and having Kalios try to play main tank, I think was not great for the Boston Uprising and losing a lot of that practice time.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, Gamsu was incredible again in their match against the Valiant. The guy is, I mean, he's one of the top tanks in the league, arguably top 3, you could say. It's like, I mean, when it comes
Do we
down
need to
tanks-
revise his Winston?
revise his Winston.
Remember we did the ranking.
Yeah, we did the tank
Muma,
ranking.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely way up there. So I think him coming back is certainly helpful for this roster. He looked revitalized and everything seemed to be clicking again for them. Striker performs not as well when he's out. I think Hydration's right. They do coordinate on their dives particularly effectively. So Boston should be a tougher opponent for the rest of the stage, and as long as Boston's still or Gamsu's still there. And that said, you guys, the last match of the regular part of stage 2 is you guys versus Boston. So that one might be a bit tricky for you. And I think that the biggest issue for you guys is that you, with all of the other stage playoffs sort of playing weaker opponents this week, your guys are a bit unlucky because New York, London, and Seoul are all playing pretty soft schedules, and you have to play against Boston this coming week and Philadelphia. So you have you have to win both those matches, and you have a 3-map lead over Seoul, but it's not set in stone that you guys are going to make the stage playoffs.
Right.
Are you concerned about Boston at all? Which team are you more afraid of, or taking more seriously, or think is a harder matchup for you? Is it Philadelphia or is it Boston?
I think it's Philadelphia. They're very similar teams, but something about Philadelphia is just seems scarier, you know?
They're very similar teams when it comes to their style of play. Like they both like to run dive a lot, or what other similarities are you talking about?
A really good tracer, and then they have the second DPS who's very flexible.
Mm-hmm. Tanks are scary on Boston, though.
Yeah. Boston's tanks are definitely scarier.
Who do you think has the edge in terms of supports? Are you more worried about Philadelphia supports or the supports over in Boston?
Yeah, Philadelphia supports. Boombox and Neptune are really strong.
So you sort of see each team, one team has the better tanks, one team has the better supports.
Yeah.
DPS about even. I can see that. But yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I was going to say Boston is just, they've been a weird team this stage because of Gamsu's absence. So I think they will probably go back to about where they were once that all settles down. As long as it's not true that they're trying to like trade their Korean players or whatever rumors are going around. Why
would they want to do that?
I don't know why they want to do that. That's just been the rumors. We were discussing it.
Get that money. That's why.
Well, it was it was like Slasher tweeting that they were trying to look for trade opportunities for like Gamsu, Kalios, or the Gamsu Striker and Neko, which sounds insane to me, but
you have to understand, Gamsu was like, you know what? I'm thinking I might take 2 weeks in Cabo, feeling like another one of those holidays, unless I maybe ended up on a different team.
I don't know what's going on with the rumors of that team. They were denied by, of course, naturally they were denied by the uprising, as you would expect, but I don't have any additional insight into that whole situation, if it even exists.
Right, unfortunately, I can't find this tweet, so you're going to have to tell me if you remember this, Monte. But someone, I believe it was someone associated with the Philadelphia Fusion, like a manager or a coach or someone, made a tweet when all this like banter stuff happened. And it was some sort of a tweet that was along the lines of like, oh, sort of like, come to our team if you want to trash talk. Or some, did you see this tweet? Do you know what I'm referring to?
They made that to Fuel, I think.
Who was it though on Philadelphia? Do you remember?
It was like the owner, I think.
Yeah, it was one of the owner.
Right, okay. Because I need to see what the wording was before I roast this. I need to know exactly what he said.
Oh, after like the whole Sato stuff?
Yeah, I believe it was like referring to that.
No, it wasn't referring to that. Like very specifically.
No, but I mean, like, yes, exactly.
Trying to find out. Hold on. I'll be able to pull it up.
Let's see what his name was. Because I just wanted to see what the wording was exactly, because
all these people on Twitter complaining how hard it is to support their owl team when management does X or Y. Come on over to the Fusion. We have Chef Heidi, cosplay BZ, a treehouse with sideshow. No controversy here. We just pedomgenate. That one?
I think so, yeah. Like, first of all, you didn't even use your own catchphrase, which is like, this is how we do it in Philly or whatever. Like, if you're ever going to have an opportunity to do that logically, use your brain, mate. You know what marketing is. Secondly, when you say all that stuff, no controversy here. Yeah, because you just delete the shit. We all remember the video, mate. Remember, you can't delete anything off the internet, so it's no wonder you don't make any memes, is it?
Which is hilarious because they're actually owned by Comcast, so they should know better than anybody else that you can't delete things off the internet.
All right, I thought you meant they were literally trying to hello Comcast. Yeah, we're from the Philadelphia Fusion. Yeah, okay. What was that got to do with us? Were you sponsors? Oh yeah, sure. Can you delete a video off the internet for us? Well, it doesn't really work that way. But are you our sponsor or not? This is the way we do it in Philly. We delete shit, okay? So that's unreal, isn't it? Why are they doing that?
I think it is true, though. Like that organization made a lot of mistakes, like because they were trying to figure out shit right as they bought the team. But to their credit, ever since, like, they didn't know, I don't think, that Sato had that account boosting history. And that video was obviously hilariously terrible, but their social media has actually been really good ever since then.
Been good since then. Yeah.
They've been funny, like their branding is like good. They've been like, they've done a really good job of setting up the house for their team. Everything's been great from Philadelphia ever since the early mistakes, the learning mistakes, but they've been doing a good job ever since then. And it's true. I mean, they do take care of their players super well. That house is great that they're in. Their hospitality has been really good. They really care. So I like them a lot. I was very suspicious of them thanks to all the bullshit at the beginning, but they've definitely turned it around.
Okay. Right. We're not going to do every team on this one, and we're obviously not going to waste our time asking Hydration about the Shanghai Dragons. So,
look, we're not even good. Like, there's not even a point. They don't even have DPS players anymore. All our DPS players are in China.
So we basically only got 3 teams left, Hydration. We've got Shock, Mayhem, and Fuel. Which of the 3 do you want to talk about now?
Shock.
Okay, there we go then. So you've already hyped up that they're literally going to have the best Western DPS player in a future stage, but they do not have that player yet. Now, as I referenced on the last show, actually, when this Korean commentator for the Overwatch League talked about the Shock, he literally said they are an amazing team and that they would do amazingly this stage. Now, they definitely have not done amazingly this stage. So are they a team that you've scrimmed against much? Are they a team that you know a lot about?
Oh, you cut out there at the end.
Are they a team you've scrimmed much? Are they a team you know a lot about?
I haven't really played much against them, but
what do you think of them as a team?
Right now, they're kind of weak. But
In what
they're
way?
bringing in some really strong players.
Okay, but right now though, why are they weak?
It feels like they're a bit disjointed. They're not like fully all on the same page. Like they have good players like Dante and Baby Bay. But parts of their team are lacking.
Monte, what do you think of Moth, the addition of Moth?
I think it's been fine for them. Obviously, they took a win against Houston that was relatively convincing this last week. They played well against the weaker London roster also. I still think there's some fucking crazy shit that must be going on in their comms because they're like the opposite of the Valiant. When it comes to overtime or a moment where they just have to play aggressively to finish out with an advantage, they completely shit the bed. Like completely. There'd be situations where they're a couple players up, they have a huge ultimate advantage, and then all of a sudden, this happened against London in that first map that they played on Volskaya. They should take point A. There's no reason why they shouldn't be taking point A, and they find a way to lose through like a poor dive, miscommunication, somebody like them playing too passively, like they just won't push an advantage. They'll like allow somebody to come back who's respawning because they're taking so much time instead of hunting down players and killing them. They look so scared. And in general, they're a passive team, but I just don't understand how these situations with such obvious edges that basically any other team in the league would be able to close on are being ignored. So something must be crazy, must be going on in terms of their shot calling. I do think that that's something that can change, particularly when Super enters the lineup, because I know that he has been, from talking to San Francisco, they really value his shot calling. So maybe that's something that can be switched around. I think that the addition of Architect is going to allow them to play a lot more types of compositions, because right now they're just basically playing like Dante only plays Tracer and Sombra, essentially, and Baby Bay plays McCree, Widow, Soldier, and then occasionally Roadhog. So they're super predictable. Now, all of that said, they did look better this last week. They played well against Houston. I do think they're on the rise, and I do think that with the addition of new players, they are going to be quite fearsome. But for now, like they've got to fix whatever is going on in those communications, or because they just collapse. It's like the any sign of pressure, or it's like internal pressure too. It's when they feel like they should be doing something, they just can never execute it.
I'm also calling it now that since they're going to add in Super and Sinatra to Dante, there's going to be so much shit talking from this team that they're either going to be the best team to watch in terms of personalities, or they're going to be mad fine magnets.
I think I'm really going to enjoy, I think, the addition of a few of these players that are very outspoken.
Plus, the good thing about the Shock in that sense as well is like they still are decent considering they don't have those players at the moment. And if they get good, all of a sudden the league actually becomes super, like the amount of parity could be really, really good, because now we've got a bunch of decent Western teams, whereas like obviously before the Korean teams would just run away with it. So we need a bit more spice.
Well, Houston was like obviously a top competitor in the last stage. Gladiators
still could fix it pretty easily.
Yeah, there are a lot of scenarios where I think the addition of more players, and now teams really know what their weaknesses are. And San Francisco was I know I'm friends with the CEO of the team. Their intention was really never to be good right off the bat. They wanted to build around younger players on a longer timeline. So now they have that opportunity to do that. They're getting Architect right after he turns 18, Sinatra, Super right after they turn 18. This was the plan the entire time, was to play for more of a long-term building process. And I think we're going to finally get to start seeing that, which is fun.
And now they can just field all these 18-year-old kids. It's going to be like the fucking Power Rangers or something. Let's hope they can form the Megazord. Sadly, I'm now referencing things. Oh no, there is a movie out of them actually. The kids will know what I'm talking about. Monty.
I suppose people know the references now.
They do. Sadly, I'll have to stop using the references now. I hate it when kids get all the references. I like to exclusively do references from the 80s to the early 90s.
And also Socrates.
Socrates, yeah. Like to kick it with him still. Still there. Right. Let's see.
I think we do have to talk about the fuel and what a mess they are.
Yeah, we will. We'll save that till the end, right? So what about the Florida Mayhem? Things are somewhat looking up for them. Remember, they used to be utterly terrible. Like, they used to literally, yeah.
They did well this last week. I mean, they played well against the Gladiators. They won. They won against the Valiant. They're picking up matches. They won against the Fuel last week. They're like going 1-1 on their weeks. It hasn't been awful.
Hydration, what do you think? Florida Mayhem.
They're definitely looking a lot stronger recently. Logix has been playing like absolutely out of his mind,
which is what we've been waiting to have happen for a long time. Logix to actually live up to what we know Logix can do. So that's been fun. How do you think about Tvik?
I think he's still like a really good player.
Do you think he was slumping at the beginning of Owl?
It just kind of felt like they weren't really confident, and like they hesitated a lot. It seemed like. But so they have one of those DPS players who are like very flexible and good at all the heroes they play.
So you think the biggest thing is that they were too hesitant? Does Mayhem have their mojo back? Is that what's happening? You think it's a more of an attitude thing?
Yeah, it definitely looks like it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, we never really knew why Logix was underperforming to the degree that he was compared to the online stuff. But I honestly think there are a couple things going on. So for one, when they played against you, they were targeting Fissure super hard in that game. He was dying very quickly at the start of those fights. You guys made adjustments later on. So when you saw that happening, and you saw Fissure just being mega focused, what did you guys do in the match to change it to make sure that you could release some of the pressure from him?
Just like try to shut down Logix, basically.
So you wanted to, so your answer to that was to remove Logix. So you wanted to pressure Logix in turn so that he couldn't deal so much damage to Fissure right away?
Yeah, because like whenever we go in, he just like headshot a tank, and it's over. But if we shut him down beforehand, then we have a lot more to work with.
When can Saya play an awesome guy player?
I don't know. I don't know what their visa situation is. Ryder, their coach, is already here, so I actually don't know when they will be arriving. I don't even know if they're all that necessary with the improvement that's happening. I think going back to the Fissure thing, I think what was most impressive for me was that Florida before had never really shown a game plan for a specific opponent. Like, it wasn't obvious what their goal was, or that they were making it an adaptation to play against a particular team or a particular style. And that was the first time that I really noticed Florida like trying to target somebody. As stupid as that sounds.
I mean, I think their goal was just make the beating stop.
Yes. I think that they were practicing generally. But honestly, it was Mineral. They had one coach in terms of their strategic support staff. And I think that having Ryder there, even with only a week or two having been there, it's another person to watch VODs constantly. You know what I mean? So I feel like finally they're starting to build out that infrastructure where they can get better game plans provided to them by their coaches. So I think Ryder has already made an impact that I see in this team because they hadn't displayed anything remotely like that previously.
Monte obviously means, by the way, for context, watch VODs of the other teams coming up and prepare for them. Not watch the VODs of the Florida Mayhem. That's like watching the fucking Ring or something, you know, like the depression that will come over you. You will die within 7 days.
It's not so bad now. They're trying to de-ringify themselves.
Yes,
right.
It's gotten better. It's gotten better, yes. Right.
But I also think, honestly, it has been an attitude issue, because if you think about it, so they were living in these apartments that were like an hour away from like 45 minutes or an hour away from the studio. And Tvik and Swoosh were the only people who could drive them in this van back and forth. So other teams, now remember, they practice in the studio. So they're there like 6 days a week, right?
Yeah.
And so they were losing, 12 hours of practice time a week? Like 2 hours a day? 6 days a week. That's 48 hours of practice time a month. So I think they moved recently. I think Zappis being there has given them, it hasn't been that successful, them using him yet, but at least you can see that they're trying different strategies and experimenting with their lineup, which I think is great, that they can take some of the load off of their players that way. And I think honestly, the biggest thing for me is probably their attitude. I think moving closer, not having to deal with the stress of the transportation, having increased practice time, having a new coach there to help out Mineral, having Zappis there to try and run some different compositions. I think all of these things have improved the mood more than anything of the Mayhem. And it's not so, I feel like watching them, you could just feel that they were unhappy with the situation, and I don't really feel, I don't get that same sense from their game planning. Like they had, a lot of times I felt like they just fucking given up. You know what I mean? They were going through the motions, but I don't feel the last couple of weeks have been that way.
But transitioning to a team that you look at them, they look like they just feel bad. They feel as though they've just given up. Dallas Fuel have lost their last, I think it's something like the last 11 maps in a row.
Well, they won a couple. Yeah, they won a couple against the Mayhem, but they did get reverse swept by the Mayhem. So yes, it is
repeatedly banged on by everyone.
Yes, it is the last 11 maps in a row. They looked okay. Obviously, they won both their matches. They beat the Gladiators in the first week of Stage 2, but since then, they have lost every single match.
A lot of water under the bridge since then.
Yeah, 6 losses, in fact.
Hydration.
Yeah.
Is this team, are the players in this team overrated?
Are they what?
Overrated.
Are they overrated?
I don't really think so. I think they have strong players. They're just not meshing well together.
Okay. Do they lack a specific piece, a type of a player, or a player who plays a specific hero that you think would turn it all around?
Well, they definitely lack a main tank, that's for sure.
Where is Coco? Where are all these players going? It's like they all go into the Mendo black hole. It's like nobody has seen Coco in. He's been streaming at least. I've seen that. But where are all these Overwatch League players on these rosters going? Remember,
managed to get out of it.
Well, I don't know if he would agree that his escape has been so successful or as good as he would have hoped.
See, this is a team that if they'd have known what would happen now, they should have been going ham to get Fisher. In fact, here's the conspiracy theory. They get Gamsu. Would you like me now?
Would actually help them quite a bit, I think. I just don't understand where Coco went. Why are you trying to make Taimu a tank when you have an Apex winning tank on your roster? Like, what is there? And people criticize Kai, but the shit he's had to put up with is just insane, right?
He's bullshit, yeah.
Like, how are you supposed to coach in that situation where you never have all your players available to you? Who knows what happened? I think, like, honestly, so much of this stuff isn't Coco's fault. And also, I don't even know what Hastro was tweeting about when he said, "Oh, we have all the powers in the hands of our coaches now." So you're implying that it wasn't before? Like, is this just like a setup to like throw somebody under the bus because of decisions that were made previously?
Also,
who is in control of these decisions, beforehand?
Again, if you're in management, like, just another little quick tip for you guys, like, you don't wait until almost 2 full splits stages in to be like, starting now. Like, what are you talking about? Should we start from day one? What the hell are you talking about? You had all these good players. What are you doing?
For people who criticize Kai, first off, he's had success with the NV roster previously. And you could say, okay, well, he was given that later on. You know, they had already been very successful before Kai got there. You know what else he did? He created a fucking kick-ass USA World Cup team and coached them into very good shape as well. So are you really going to... Kai has a history...
You know what you've just done?
What?
There's another conspiracy theory. He needs to join the Houston Outlaws.
He can only coach Americans. Okay.
There we go. I've solved it. I've solved the problem for you.
I'm just saying that I know Kai did way more than any of the other committee members to create and to coach that NA roster, right?
Okay.
Or the Team USA roster, and they performed super well. And he was the one with Stur and Jason Kaplan who were running all of this scrims with all the American players to figure out who would mesh together the best. And when he was given control of the roster, he did great things with it, and they looked good. So I think that Kai has had demonstrable success in the past, and that this is a situation both not of his own choosing and not of his own creation. I don't know in particular, like, which players were that he signed versus the organization signed. I don't know maybe he signed all of those or wanted them. I don't really know what the process behind getting Rascal and AKM and XQC and all these other additions that they were making were. Watch out, man.
You won't be able to hear us. This guy doesn't know how mics work, but okay. The other thing is, right, let's be real. The real reason why people are going in on Kai all the time is because, first of all, he does try to address like what people say on Twitter, which means that they're gonna shoot the messenger. That happens. But more importantly, there's so many rats out there who call themselves fans who just cause there's so many star player names and massive names in this team, they don't want to attack the players. So as a result, they attack the coach. Like, at the end of the day, this guy would have to be the worst coach of all time to make all these players play this badly. Like, look at other teams. There's other teams can play badly. You know, one or two players still play well. Overwhelming. Like, if you look at this roster now, Monty, it's unreal. You look at it now, you're like, what the fuck? This team should be so good.
Yeah, I do think that Coco was not performing up to the standards required of Owl earlier in the season, but for him to completely vanish in this situation, there's obviously something else going on, because they're not sitting there saying, you know what, we're just going to keep playing Taimu on the tank. That's clearly the solution here, right? That's absurd. They're not idiots. Like, there must be some other explanation for Coco not being on the roster right now. So I don't know, man. Like, and obviously they put a lot of resources and practice time into XQC for him to be suspended twice. Like, it's not the coach's fault that happened. He can't be responsible for his players' behavior 24/7. That's an unreasonable expectation of a coach in any sport. And it's not the coach's fault when all of a sudden the player that the coach was relying on is no longer able to play the games, which disrupted the entire game plan in the first place. So,
and have they just completely given up on playing Seagull? Where's he? Is he just
I don't know, man. I don't know. Although I will say, like, I wouldn't play Seagull with AKM and Rascal on the roster either. I don't know what Seagull would do that the other players can't do better.
Just have him practice.
Well, Seagull's been practicing playing off tank. Yeah, they've said that. They've said that he's like practicing to. I think this team is just. They haven't. I think the frustrating thing with the Fuel is that they haven't been able to form an identity with their new players because they haven't had them available to play. For fuck's sake, like, it's not the coach's fault. The whole team has been disrupted. And then obviously on top of that, think about the morale issues that this team must be having right now too. They're in the dumps. They've spent so much time practicing with players only to have them not be able to play or released from the team. I mean, how do you, it's like, it's hard to mentally overcome that.
And plus they can't kick any of the players.
I also feel like Kai is like far from the problem. I feel like they have a lot more internal things that people just don't like. They can't really talk about it.
Of course not. I mean, it's clear they have some other internal issues because Coco's not playing. Like, we know that there must be some sort of internal issue there. That's the only reasonable explanation. But I think it's hard to motivate people in that. They've been adding more coaches too. Peak is there now. I don't know if they're going to add any more coaches, but they've been trying to take some of the burden off of Kai as well. But it's been a really shitty situation where there's not a good solution with all of the personalities that have been surrounding this team and the effects that I like losing some of these players, I think, has had. But I don't know. I think there's not like an easy fix to this. Like you have to get a main tank now. And they're another team where if you're not going to play Coco, then just cut him. Like there's no need for these players to be taking up space on the roster when you need to make some shifts to flesh things out.
What tanks are available though? You have to just get another Korean? What do you think, Dehydration? Come on.
Well, didn't they announce that they got OG?
Yes, you're right.
But then there was all that alleged scandal of him account boosting, which I don't even know if that's true, but people were saying that he was an account booster. So now the question is, does he have a visa? Is he going to get signed? Is he going to get suspended immediately like Sato was? I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know if it's true.
What he should also do is, who was the player who got the $1,000 fine in that disciplinary hearing for account sharing?
Silk Thread.
Yeah. What they should do is, instead of boosting, just say that he was account sharing with like 15 people, pay $1,000 per person. It's worth the 15K to get him in the league. And then you get him in the team. There you go, no problem.
I just don't even know anything about OGE as a player.
I actually duoed with him quite a bit.
You did?
Okay, tell us then. Come on, give us some insight.
Tell us about OGE.
Who is this guy?
He's pretty good. His English is not bad at all. I think he definitely has potential to improve fuel quite a bit.
What type of a tank player is he?
He's pretty aggressive.
When you say you dude with him, has he been playing on the NA server from Korea or what?
Yeah, he's been playing on the NA server for like a very long time. He was trialing for a lot of contenders teams. And that's how he kind of made his way up.
Oh, well, there you go. You have more information than I do.
Now I'm pulling for... That's the way he said that in the most condescending fashion possible.
No, I'm
playing into your old persona as usual. Okay,
I'm impressed. I don't know anything about him. I'm interested in this.
Listen, the tone sounded a certain way, so I just call it how I see it, Monte. You know how it is.
I know you just try and get me in trouble is what you do.
Apologize for not knowing that what hydration knows, and